Today, we are not celebrating the ninth Sunday after Pentecost. Everybody figured that one out? Why? Because today is August 6th, and in the liturgical calendar, this is the feast of the Transfiguration of Jesus. And this feast takes precedence over an ordinary Sunday. While the celebration of this feast wasn't common in the church until about the 4th century, it wasn't until 1457 that Pope Callistus III ordered its general observance and fixed it on the liturgical calendar on October 6th, which happened to be the date he received word that the Crusaders had defeated the Turks at Belgrade, Serbia. The actual event of the Transfiguration probably occurred around the time of the Jewish Festival of Booths, which celebrated the dwelling of God with humankind. The Transfiguration of Jesus reveals how this dwelling takes place in and through the Messiah, the Son of God in human flesh. The presence of Moses and Elijah represent the Old Testament itself. Moses for the law and Elijah for the prophets. An account of the Transfiguration is found in all three synoptic Gospels and are similar in recounting this event. The Gospels draw heavily on Old Testament descriptions of the Sinai encounter of Moses with God, as in our Old Testament reading from the book of Exodus, and on prophetic visions of the Son of Man. One way to get an idea of what Transfiguration means is to look at how it has been represented in art. And I searched through my collection of icons, and I brought some prints, which I'm going to pass around to you all to have a chance to look at and kind of see if you see something that kind of resonates with you about what Transfiguration means. Interestingly enough, icons are more than just a picture. They actually represent the event that they're portraying. So for those faithful believers to look at an icon of the Transfiguration is to see the Transfiguration. And that's pretty powerful. Peter, James, and John accompanied Jesus part of the way on his journey up Mount Tabor, which tradition names as the site of the Revelation. They were witnesses to a glimpse of Jesus' divinity that certainly struck fear in their hearts. Note on the icons that the apostles are shown as awestruck, almost frightened by the very power and majesty of the vision of God that they were seeing. The glory of God was being revealed in Jesus, despite the fact that he had warned the apostles that his glory and his suffering were to be inextricably connected. This is something to think about. However, what they saw and heard was not as important as why the story is told. Transfigure comes from the Latin translation of the Greek word metamorphosis. Meta, which means to change, and morph, which means form. Think back to biology class and remember the lowly caterpillar changing into a beautiful butterfly. That's metamorphosis. The gospel writers used familiar religious language to describe what happened to Jesus when the glory of God was revealed in him. The story of the Transfiguration is one that grounds the identity of Jesus as Son of God, but through the experience of suffering, death, and resurrection. The earthly trappings of glory, power, riches, and fame are not the same as the glory of God brought to us through the cross. The apostles perhaps had a better understanding of what Jesus meant in saying this, but it was not until after the resurrection that they fully understood what he said and the significance of what that meant for the world. We are tempted to wrap Jesus in all kinds of false messages because glory through suffering makes no sense. But just because something is not rational does not mean that it is not real. Our call as Christians is to see through false claims of earthly glory, to face the cross, its suffering and death, trusting that a resurrected life in God lies beyond. The Transfiguration reveals to us our ultimate destiny as Christians, the ultimate destiny of all humankind and all creation, to be transformed and glorified by the majestic splendor of God. By the very power of God, we can be changed into the likeness of Christ, restored to unity with God and one another, united in God's love. It is God's love for all of creation that makes this possible. Now that is the end of my sermon that I had written. But for all the days that I was working on this sermon, there was another something that kept bubbling in my mind. I couldn't figure out how to get it into the sermon until last night when I was laying in bed and I couldn't fall asleep. And I decided to just spit it out. The date, August 6th, is also another kind, a remembrance of another kind of transfiguration. 72 years ago today, on August 6th, 1945, the United States Army Air Force bomber Enola Gay dropped a bomb called Fat Man on Hiroshima, Japan. This event became a kind of transfiguration for the whole world because it ushered in the atomic age. And it showed us what we as humans, what kind of evil we are capable of releasing in the world. And I couldn't help but think about the good transfiguration and the evil transfiguration and the coincidence of them being on the same date. I'm a big fan of NCIS, and one of Gibbs' rules is there are no coincidences. I don't think there are. I think that somehow the fact that the first atomic bomb that was used in war was dropped on August 6th, the Feast of the Transfiguration, was somehow interconnected because it showed the true power of evil and what could happen to the world if we let it flourish, and we can't. I'm going to repeat the very last sentence of the sermon that I wrote. By the very power of God, we can be changed into the likeness of Christ, restored to unity with God and one another, united in God's love. It is God's love for all of creation that makes this possible. Amen.